Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, back with another Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. Here to talk about the Collins family history book. You know, I've often said the Collins family history book isn't the most accurate thing, and it's not. It makes it interesting. It does, but in the same context with DS, if you're paying attention, it makes sense. How do you protect a secret? Um, you lie your ass off. In the world of Dark Shadows, um, the writers, Dan Curtis, they all did a good job of crafting this history book of, okay, we can basically say whatever the hell we want and come back to it later. Or just say whatever we want as we go along. And that's true, you can when you're making your own chronological characters, even though, you know, Art, Art Wallace, you're going off of Shadows on the Wall. You're also going off of Dan Curtis's dream of a woman on a train. I'm going to say Jane Eyre, if you will. Um, it really. I'm getting notifications as I talk. Sorry, on Instagram. Um, but it's really interesting what they do with this. Not just retaining the Barnabas, but other things too. But we have to get into Barnabas. But it also makes you, and before I do, it also makes you question what happened before. How much we know. Look, do I believe Isaac Collins' journey is told to a T in that history book? No, probably not. There's probably things omitted from there, or just things that the generation of Elizabeth, Roger don't honestly know. Um, Again, when you hear often enough times to sort of combine reality and fiction a bit, when you hear a story from your from your grandfather or your great grandfather, um, and a lot of times it's probably true, right? If it's about your family, okay. With the Collinses, is it true the stories they're told, the stories they hear from whether it's their aunt, their mothers, their fathers, etc. They're only getting stories that have been passed down to them. Okay, for example, Jameson Collins. Jameson Collins, who was around, was around Quentin, was around his father Edward. Um, his his sister Amy, right? We off, or sorry, not Amy. Forget her name. I'm gonna kick myself now. But you get what I'm saying. That if he's told something by Edward, there's sins Edward doesn't know about, right? Edward never finds out about Barnabas. Um, it's because he's not meant to. Um, whether do I think there was an alternate reality he did? Again, that gets into parallel time. So yeah, probably there's probably a parallel time universe that Dark Shadows, and I'm not trying to go off topic here about the Collins Family History book, but these are things, when you get into parallel time, you're getting into parallel time history books. So we don't know, and again, we don't know what decisions were made in 1897 parallel time. That would be a trip and a half. To say, can you imagine Instead of 1897, the timeline we know, the timeline where Barnabas goes back. And it's real interesting. You can't necessarily apply other time travel shows to DS necessarily. Like, you hear in the World of Dark Shadows that 1795 keeps repeating itself no matter what happens. So, long before Victorian Winters ever came to Collinwood, 1795 was always reliving itself. Just, even with the event, even with Victoria's slightly different journey, slightly, and you might say, why is that? And here's my opinion on this. I've talked about, and again, this is going to be a long process video. If I don't finish this video with one part, I might do this in two. This is why I say Dark Shadows sort of gets into fade a bit. I'm not saying characters don't make a decision. They do. Even in parallel time, they make different decisions. But if your decision that you make is different, still leads you to the same place. Not necessarily the same exact situation, but the same place. Okay, I'll use Willie Loomis. Look at the Willie Loomis we love and know, the thief, the guy who discovers Barnabas's coffin. Okay, there are minor changes in the parallel time Willie Loomis. He marries a Collins. He marries Carolyn. They love each other, by the way. I mean, it's one of the best love stories we don't really talk about a lot. It is, and it might be time for a character retrospective on this too. Because they really did love one another. And it's, again, just when you think you're going to get happily ever after in Dark Shadows, no, not going to be the case. Which is amazing, but it's just going to be crazy. When you think about Willie Loomis, okay, he's not a thief. He's a writer. He was somebody who wrote the life and death of Barnabas Collins in his own time, in parallel time. A lot of people liked that book, but he had trouble writing another book. He couldn't write another book. And what happens? Barnabas, who wanted to go to parallel time, accidentally does in every way. I mean, because when Barnabas is standing in the parallel time room, I started this off as the Collins family history book, and I've got into this whole montage of there's a lot of things to get to when you discuss this thing. And it is, like, Dark Shadows is just something when you're talking about it, you go into other things because it connect, in a sense, it kind of connects. Okay, Barnabas goes to parallel time, right? What happens? Instead of Willie Loomis opening a chain coffin, he puts Barnabas in his chain coffin because Willie notices his wife is acting strange. He picks up on it. And, he discovers Barnabas, this vampire. So he chains him up. He decides that he's now going to make Barnabas his new sorry. He's going to make this Barnabas Collins the new subject of his next book. So instead of talking about the Barnabas Collins that had already died, he's now talking about Barnabas Collins, a vampire. I've often said you're welcome, Anne Rice, but in a sense, this is Interview with a Vampire. The Dark Shadows did Interview with a Vampire before Anne Rice did. Think about that. Oh my god. Oh my god. The late Anne Rice. Oh my god. So, um, which is just amazing when you think about that. So Willie Loomis chains Barnabas in a coffin, in his coffin. This was not what Barnabas was wanting when he came to Parallel Time. In many aspects, Barnabas thought he would have a whole different lifestyle. He thought that, you know, he had maybe false expectation, and he did. And now his fate is right back where it really initially ended up being. He was chained in a coffin for 200 years. Now he's chained in a coffin by a writer who's going to use him to gain a profit. By the way, Willie Loomis in our timeline was a thief who was looking to gain profit. It's not that much different than what we think, because I've talked about how fate's involved here, and I do think fate's involved here, because if there wasn't, again, fate doesn't mean you're not making a decision. Fate to me means you're making a decision that was going to happen anyway. Your decision really didn't change all that much, did it? Did it really change that much? Where did you really end up? Willie Loomis. Willie still ended up in Collinwood. Okay, the two biggest difference, Willie's a writer, Willie marries Carolyn. By the way, in the other Willie Loomis does have a fiance. The Willie Loomis we know. And it's not Carolyn, by the way. I want to clarify that. So, now, are there bigger differences? Sure. Okay, Roger does not have a son. Roger does not have a son. And that is that huge? Yeah. I would say that's one of the larger differences. Quentin is the master of Collinwood, not Elizabeth. Quentin is. Again, you have to, with Parallel Time, you have to make changes that look different enough from what you know. And I do think the writers did a great job doing that. So there are changes that are made. There are differences. But it's not... Okay. I would say with Parallel Time, other than Quentin, there's Bruno, who's in the house, who's in the what we know as Matthew Morgan's cottage. He's living there, okay, in our time. But he's not Matthew Morgan. He's a music. Bruno is. Oh God, did I mess that up? I probably did, but it's okay. Yeah, Bruno. You know, is living in Matthew Morgan. It was what we consider Matthew Morgan's cottage. He's a musician. He was in love with Angelique. He had an attraction to her, and that's something. Is it? And here's my thing here with Bruno. Bruno Roger had an attraction to Angelique. Many men did. You hear it. Is that really a stretch? Come on. Is it? It's no. It's not. I mean, even on our time, look, Laura Parker, beautiful woman. Okay, in our timeline, in the 1970 timeline, yeah, there are many men who would find themselves attracted to Angelique, so it's not a stretch, right? It's nothing. It's nothing you're going to call bullshit on. All right. Um, the most shocking thing you find out with this parallel time is Angelique has somehow died. And it's like, wait, is she a witch? Like, but you find out she was into the occult. You find out, her father is into some sort of magic or whatever. Her father is Timothy Stokes. So Angelique has a dad. Timothy is a lucky man. Timothy's a lucky man. Uh, um, um, so, um, I started this off as in the Collins Family History book, but what I find most interesting is what is the Collins Family History book in parallel time? Is what I'm trying to get to, really. What does it say about certain things? What we know Barnabas wasn't a vampire, okay, in parallel time. But when you get to 1841 parallel time, you do hear certain things that are eyebrow raising about Barnabas. Again, there was a video me, Patrick, and Alan did about really we don't know a lot about Barnabas as a person, and really we don't. We know what we have seen and heard, which okay. In our timeline, his father was Joshua, his mother was Naomi, he had a sister named Sarah, an uncle named Jeremiah. He was meant to be married to Josette. Eventually, we find that out. Again, that's another part of the Collins family history book that doesn't exactly tell the truth. It omits certain things and it adds something else. Okay, did Josette marry Jeremiah? Yes, that's not a lie. But she was what it doesn't say what it does not tell you is who she was intended to marry. And again, when you're really getting into the idea of Joshua as a character, you get why he does this. Number one, Joshua, we've all talked about this. Joshua is a man who just wants, just wants this union to happen. He wants Josette Dupre to marry a male Collins, not him, because he's married to Naomi. B, he's too old. He's, so to Joshua, did it really matter who married Josette? No. As long as, again, this is how relaxed he is about Barnabas and Josette. He's so certain that will happen. He's trying to line up another wedding. He's trying to line up Millicent Collins, who's his cousin, and his brother, Jeremiah. And Jeremiah is a man who, you can tell he doesn't really want to be married. And it kind of hints that, man, this guy must have had a bad marriage previously. That's sort of your only real hint that Jeremiah has no interest in a marriage. Sorry. And so you get into this whole aspect of the Collins family history book, things being changed because they're hiding other things. No, it didn't matter who Josette married necessarily to Joshua, but he's not going to have a public scandal. He's not going to let the public know that Barnabas was meant to marry Josette. And you might say the wedding invitations went out. This is how the Collins handled it. Oh, that was just fake gossip. And brilliantly done. Because you really find out, look, if Burke Devlin always told us Collins money, Collins power, Collins control a lot of it. Burke Devlin was not wrong in saying that. Yes, the Collins control a lot of the narrative that come into Collinwood. I consider it that why Burke was right, because Burke knew that. Burke experienced it firsthand when going to jail. But it was always this way, is what Burke is telling you, in every way. He may not directly say, "Oh, it's always been like this." No, it's been like this, again, in a sense, always. And I love how Mitchell Ryan says that. He says that in an episode I'm literally going to be reviewing tomorrow. I'm going to be reviewing some episodes tomorrow. And he's right. The Collinses control the narrative because they control the most votes, they control the most jobs, they control the most money. In a sense, they have a monopoly. Okay? And with that monopoly comes a lot of power and a lot of sway. It's the judge in 1795 says, when Joshua says about, "Doesn't my word mean anything?" And the judge looked at him, he goes, "Yes, your word does mean a lot. Like, are you serious? Like, are you literally..." This is where Joshua can't bullshit no more. Especially with impartial judge, group of judges who's made a decision. Well, he's talking to the main one. And the judge tells him, "Yeah, your word does carry a lot. And it would have carried a lot had you testified in court for this woman. If you would have came to us and said, 'No, this woman is not a witch,' you give your word, that would have meant a hell of a lot for her. But you didn't do that." And that's something that, again, a lot of things point back to the money and the power that the Collins represent and have. And you might say, is it an evil power? It can be. Again, 1795, again, if you're... Because I know, there are people out there who find the beginning episodes boring. Now, I'm not one of them. Again, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second, guys. It's another... When you first hear about Josette, who do you hear that she married? Jeremiah. You hear that their marriage was miserable, that people in the village didn't like her. Now, did the people in the village didn't like her? Maybe they didn't. I don't think you ever get a general sense of the people in the village of how they really feel about Josette in 1795, in my view. So, in order to say the people didn't like her, well, maybe they didn't. Maybe they thought, this is just such a ridiculous marriage. Maybe they didn't think much of the marriage between Josette and Barnabas, between the announcement, or let alone maybe the Collins poo-pooing the public, and the public knowing the invitations that went out were legit, and them saying, well, Josette was supposed to marry Barnabas, and now they're getting told, no, that's not the case, that's not true, you're just spreading misinformation. And the public knowing, no, we know. There are people who know what they got in the mail. Okay? And now it's changed. It's Josette is going to marry Jeremiah. And in the Collins family history book, it's written, Josette was always supposed to marry Jeremiah. So people back then just said, you know what? Let them have their way. Screw it. And just tore up invitations and probably threw them away. Could you imagine? That would be something DS could play with a bit. Not to go back to 1795, but to find an actual invitation that would say, the invitation that Naomi read about Barnabas and Josette. The invitations. Could you imagine if somebody held on to one? And somebody found out, what's this? Oh yeah, back in the day, your great grandfather or great grandfather and grandmother, they were this They were this high-powered official. They got sent a wedding invitation. That wedding didn't necessarily happen. I don't know. Could you imagine that? Oh my god. Again, Dark Shadows is full of little fun things that you could play with and wonder if they would. um, so you're told a lie. You're told a lie from the very beginning of Jeremiah and Josette. But is it a complete lie? I could see villagers resenting Josette because maybe the villagers just resented Josette because she took the last name of Collins, not because they hated the Collins, because maybe they were like, you're just lying about this marriage that is now just all of a sudden happened. Maybe there were villagers who were miffed at them. Again, maybe because of the initial witchcraft trial with Phyllis Wick, that Victoria Winters ends up at the gallows, and it's switched at the last minute because Victoria ends up back in her own time. Again, it's interesting that the Collins Family History book altered to a degree to tell a lie, or at least to tell a certain lie so the Collins don't get exposed. Look how different 1897 is to 1795. Not just in look and story. Edward Collins, when he finds out Barnabas is a vampire, he says everybody knows your secret now. You're not safe. He lets him know. No one's going to protect you. Now, not no one, but to Edward. Edward's not going to protect Barnabas. Think how different that is from the Collins of 1795. So the 1795 Collins family and the 1897, the 1897 Collins family history book, Quentin goes to France. Guess what? That's not a lie. That's not bullshit. Quentin did go to France. Maybe that never really changed. Maybe Quentin never really died. Or when he did, maybe he was brought back to life by somebody else. Maybe if it wasn't Angelique, maybe it was the attorney. I can't think of his name right now, played by Humphrey Allen Alstrado. He was into the occult. Maybe Patofe showed up anyway. We don't know. Again, there's things we don't know fully. But I do believe. Julia points out the Collins Family History book isn't known for its accuracy. No, it's not. But here's the thing. Jeremiah and Josette getting married isn't a lie. So there are truths within the lies. Quentin goes to France. That could have always been true. It's a possibility to consider. Again, we don't know. We find out, yes, Quentin leaves and goes to France. Quentin, who is an immortal werewolf, as long as his portrait's not. Even if his portrait's destroyed, he's going to become a werewolf. He never ages. He never ages. That's how that works, right? So the Collins Family History book, in a lot of ways, is an interesting study in how the Collins. Burke was right. The Collinses do control money. They control the town. They control the politics. They control the narrative that gets spin in the newspaper. I think a great sort of companion to DS. It's a story I've been reading. To Midnight and Big Up. Because the Lord family in that story control a lot of the narrative. I'll leave a link in the description. Written by my buddy John Philip Betancourt. Shout out to him. Great story. With this, again, the Collinses control the narrative, so they can, in history, put whatever they want. In 1795, they make the conscious decision to, okay, yes, Jeremiah did marry Josette, but they never talk about in that history book who Josette was supposed to marry. So they're omitting facts. Okay. Barnabas went to England and died. Yes, Barnabas died, but he never went to England. Barnabas ended up being a member of the undead. He ended up being a vampire. Yes, Joshua found out about it. Naomi died in 1795. She didn't die later on. Her death isn't initially. It's recorded later. It's not recorded in the 1700s. Sarah Collins is the one character's death that isn't altered. She dies, it's recorded. And I honestly think the reason it's not lied about is because of Naomi. And, don't lie. We can't, the pain was too real. They had lost Barnabas. They lose Sarah. Back-to-back painstaking moments. Okay, we do need to grieve here, so we're going to tell the truth. Sarah's death is 100% accurate. Yes, she dies of pneumonia. She dies of cold. That's not a lie. That's not a lie. They did not know she saw Barnabas. They didn't know she snuck out the house until it was too late. And they found her, and she was out in that night air. She got sick and died. It's one of the most saddest deaths in 1795 art. Again, 1897 is a different breed of Collins family because they're all about the truth for the most part. They print facts, apparently. Collins family history book. Is it without its scandal? No. No, there's a lot that goes on in 1897. It's scandalous as hell. Quentin himself is one of the most scandalous characters. It's what makes Quentin all the more fun because he's one of the most scandalous. He's a playboy. He flirts with women. He sleeps around with them. Interesting cat. Interesting character. He's best friends with the family attorney who's into the occult just as he is. And you also find out that the previous Quentins were into the occult. The 1841 Quentin Collins was into the occult. So it's nothing. Dark Shadows, when you really get into the Collins family history, always controlled the narrative, but they always did. The writers tied in family traits really well. The Quentins. Quentin 1841 was obsessed with the occult. Desmond Collins, who was his brother, was obsessed with the occult. One of my favorite characters, John Carlin played. I love Desmond to death. Who buys somebody a severed head for just let that sink in, okay? And then he just keeps it for himself after he believes his brother is dead, because everybody does. And he keeps it for himself. And then Quentin's alive. I had this gift for you. Here's these occult books. I had this other gift for you, and I kept it for myself. Oh my god. Oh my god. It's funny as hell. Dark Shadows has moments of comedy that are really gold. And it's a lot of what the characters end up doing decision-wise. And it's like, really? Really? You're going to keep the severed head for yourself? Your mother, Flora Collins, who's played by Joan Bennett, the late great Joan Bennett, she's not in favor of that severed head being in her house at Rose Cottage. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed my long video here. Sorry, this is going to be lengthy. Let me know what you guys think of the Collins Family History book, The Aspect of Fate. Um, Again, I probably need to do a part 2 of this. There's a lot of other things to get into. But Burke Devlin wasn't wrong. Burke wasn't wrong. The Collinses do control the narrative. They control the politics. They control a lot of the things. They don't control the people. That's evident, and maybe that's another debate in entirely. I need to get Mark Gilman on here. Mark, if you watch this video, I want to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think my question to everybody really, do you guys think maybe the villagers didn't like Josette because they knew about the marriage of Barnabas and Josette, and they knew the Collins were lying? They weren't happy with being basically saying, the family saying they were spreading misinformation when they weren't. What do you guys think? That's my question. Have a good day.